Okay, let's get right into it. There's something happening around the world, a trend that's getting harder and harder to ignore. Democratic freedoms, well, they seem to be shrinking. And it's not just in one or two spots, it looks like a global pattern. So, in this explainer, we're going to unpack the data. We're going to try to understand the mindset that's driving this whole shift and see what it really means for people on the ground.
And look, this isn't just some mild observation. To really kick things off, check out this quote. This comes from Sweden's V-Dem Institute, which is one of the top organizations tracking democracy worldwide. They're calling what we're living through the most severe magnitude of democratic backsliding ever. I mean, that's a seriously powerful and alarming statement. It really frames everything we're about to talk about. So let's start with the diagnosis. Section 1, Democracy in Decline. Where's the proof for a trend this big? Well, the evidence is popping up in the data from some of the world's most respected watchdogs. And get this, it's showing up in some very unexpected places. Now, what's so striking here is that you've got two major independent watchdogs basically seeing the same thing. On the one side, you have Freedom House pointing out that the U.S. has seen the steepest drop of any established free nation. And on the other, the V-Dem Institute takes it even a step further, saying the U.S. is no longer a liberal democracy and is in a process of autocratization. I mean, when these two major groups arrive at such similar and frankly stark conclusions about one of the world's oldest democracies, that tells you something big is going on globally. So that begs the question, why is this happening? That brings us to our next section, which tries to get at the why behind the what. Section 2, the predator's hour. Because this isn't just things passively getting worse, it's being actively driven by a whole new philosophy of politics. Political scientist Giuliano da Empoli just nails it with this idea. He argues we are entering a time where some leaders see chaos, instability, and aggression not as problems to be fixed, but as opportunities, as sources of their own strength. You know, the old rules of cooperation and stability, they're getting thrown out the window for a much more confrontational, winner-takes-all approach to power. And this isn't just some abstract theory, right? You can literally see it in the money. This number is just staggering. A 34% increase in global military spending in just 5 years. That is a huge jump. It shows a very real pivot away from diplomacy and toward a world where, as Empoli puts it, conflicts are being settled by fire and sword. The Munich Security Report actually gives this a name, and it's a perfect one: wrecking ball politics. And that paints a pretty clear picture, doesn't it? It's this idea that leaders see the established international order, the one built on norms and cooperation, as something to be torn down, all in favor of purely transactional, power-based deals. Okay, so we've got this huge global picture. Democracy is declining, politics is getting more aggressive. But what does any of that actually feel like for an ordinary person? How does this high-level trend actually impact individual lives and liberties? Well, that's what we're going to look at in Section 3. We're calling it a chilling effect, because that's exactly what happens. When the state gets more aggressive, it creates this atmosphere of fear that just silences people, often in pretty brutal ways. Just take a look at this case out of Pakistan. You have two lawyers. And what was their crime? They used social media to speak up about enforced disappearances, a really basic act of free speech and activism. The state's response? A sentence of 17 years in prison. 17? The message there is loud and brutally clear, isn't it? Questioning the state's actions is no longer just frowned upon, it's treated as a major crime. And you better believe the international community noticed. UN experts were alarmed, and they put it plainly. Exercising your right to free expression should never, ever be confused with criminal conduct, and especially not with terrorism. This quote just perfectly highlights how dangerously blurry those lines are getting, where legitimate activism gets deliberately relabeled as a threat to the country. So you see a case like that in Pakistan, and you start to realize it's part of a much bigger story, a more fundamental battle, really. And that brings us to Section 4, the price of lies, because at the very heart of all this democratic decay is an assault on truth itself. And nobody says it better than the historian Timothy Snyder. He argues that tyranny doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It has to be built on a foundation of lies. The idea is simple, but so powerful. When a society loses its grip on what's real, it becomes incredibly vulnerable to authoritarian control. A big lie, if you're repeated enough, can unravel the entire fabric of a nation. So really, what it all boils down to is this battle for reality itself.
Snyder lays it out as a really clear choice. On one side, you have truth. Facts give power to the individual. They allow us to challenge those in charge. But on the other side, you have lies. And to believe a lie, well, that's to give up your own mind, to serve a master, whether that master is a person or an algorithm. So, wow, where does that leave us? For our last section, let's just zoom out for a minute and look for some perspective from the past. Section 5, an unspoken warning. And it's fascinating because it turns out some of history's greatest minds left us with crucial advice that they never actually got a chance to give. Get this. These are words from a speech Franklin D. Roosevelt wrote, but he passed away before he could ever deliver it in 1945. Think about that. At the very end of the agony of World War II, what was on his mind? Not military strength, not power, but the science of human relationship. He saw that the very survival of civilization depended on us figuring out how to just live together in peace. And then, a decade later, something incredibly similar happened with Albert Einstein. He wrote his own final undelivered speech, and his last words were also about what it takes to build a peaceful world. He said it wasn't about power struggles, but about humanism, social justice, helping each other out, and tolerance. It's amazing. Two of the greatest minds of the 20th century, both arriving at the same simple, profound truth at the end of their lives. And that's really where this all leads us. We've seen how democracy is slipping away, how that's tied to this new, aggressive style of politics, and how it's all built on an assault on reality itself. And we've heard these incredible unspoken warnings from the past about the importance of just being decent to one another. So I guess the question I want to leave you with is this, because it ties it all together. If tyranny is truly born of lies, then what is our job as individuals and as a society to cultivate truth?